Hey guys, alrighty. This will be kind of a fun lecture, I think. So, I'm completely honest with you guys. I am learning with you. I'm reading the textbook along with you guys, and I don't always know what's coming next. So, one example of that was I talked about subliminal perception at the end of the perception chapter. That's where it seemed to fit to me. So I talked about it there as a lead into the consciousness chapter. I had no idea the textbook was eventually going to talk about subliminal perception a little further down. I hadn't got there yet. So I got there and I read it. And then the kind of interesting thing was they seem to have a different conclusion than I did, than I gave you, which made me feel really good that I feel really good about my consciousness research. And I see the difference, and I want to explain it to you. So first of all, just to kind of remind you of the difference, at the end of my lecture on that, what I had basically told you is that things that we are not aware of, we are perceiving, that there is perception without awareness, and that often that perception biases the perception we have with awareness. So remember, I talked about the nonverbal body language and how all of our signals, we're not consciously processing those things as they come from another person. We're consciously processing their words, but we're processing all of that, and it is coloring the way we think about their words, and so there is perception without awareness, and I'm saying that perception without awareness has effect. When you read the part in the chapter, it says it doesn't have an effect, but there's a really important difference between the context. And I think this is a great opportunity for me to talk a little bit more deeply about consciousness and especially subliminal perception, and make sure you leave here with the right idea of what it is. So, for example, they were talking about things like subliminal ads, research on things like that if you embedded a subliminal in some ad for a piece of merchandise, and then you showed two pieces of merchandise, there was no evidence that exposure to the subliminal somehow made people pay attention to that one preferentially. And it talked about things like that, changing one's behaviors through subliminal presentations and stuff like that. And, when I thought about it, I said, oh, no, they're right about that. So that sort of subliminal behavior modification, subliminal perception enhanced behavior modification, does not work, but subliminal perception does. And to understand the distinction between those two, I want to take you ahead in time a little bit to talk about something you're going to probably talk about quite a bit in Psych AO2, which is the Freudian notion of the unconscious. And I think when many of us think subliminal perception, we think Freudian. We've just been sort of trained to think that way. And really, what I'm going to tell you is the Freudian perspective seems to be not, well, I don't know. It's so hard to disprove Freud. Let me just get you there slowly, okay? So, in the Freudian world, when the unconscious is described and when unconscious processes are described, they're described as though they have goals of their own, like they are a little conscious entity that hides in there and does things. For example, one of the things it likes to do is sort of be a bouncer for consciousness. There are unconscious processes that gate what information is or is not allowed to enter the conscious mind. And so there, we have this entity of something that's evaluating what's coming in and making decisions. And these decisions are also often in a Freudian world based on assumptions like this person can't handle it. They can't handle what's really going on here. And so let's not even have them become aware of it. Let's just keep that out. And so, that's the notion we get of the unconscious. And so we start to think, oh, there's a little entity inside of us that has power. And so with like an unconscious subliminal tape that's supposed to make you, I don't know, get better marks, it's almost like we're going to talk to that little guy inside your head and we're going to convince him to do what you would really love him to do, and then he'll do all the work and you won't have to. Sounds really nice. I want to compare that with a different kind of view of the unconscious, and it's really the one I've been assuming all through the lectures, and it's the one almost every experimental psychologist believes. Most experimental psychologists do not believe in the Freudian notion of the unconscious, especially because of those attributes I just described. So in the cognitive world, I don't know if this captures all there is to the unconscious, but it captures 95% of the unconscious. The word habit, and the part that isn't habit is probably just hardwired biology. So, for example, there are processes that worry about our heart beating the right rate and our breathing and all that stuff. Well, that's not a habit. We didn't have to learn how to do those things. Our body came pre-wired to do those right, and those processes might be part of that pre-wiring. But think of it this way. I'll give you a couple different analogies, but let's start with this one. Imagine this scene. We have a programmer that's writing a program. This program is to solve some problem. And usually when you write it, the sort of notion is this program is looking for a certain kind of input. And if it sees that input, or if it gets that input, it does something. It goes through this process that the programmer has laid out for it, and ultimately produces some sort of output. Now, once you've written that program and it's working, you can use that over and over. And whatever it does, whatever transformation it does, it can do really quick and really efficiently, much more than when you first had to figure things out to write the program. And so it's kind of like the programmer's consciousness. And anytime you get thrown into a brand new situation, where you've never been and you don't know the right way to behave, that's when your conscious mind is active. But what it's doing is kind of learning about this situation. And eventually it's coming up with habits. So, imagine, just to simplify things, oh, well, geez, COVID makes everything more complicated, including my simple examples. But I was going to say this, and then we can talk about COVID a little more. Yeah, okay, this will work perfectly. I've got it all working out in my mind now. My conscious mind is active. Okay, so if you're in some situation, let's say meeting people, let's say you're starting to be in a business context and you're meeting people from other businesses. And at first it's very awkward. You're not quite sure what to do, how to react to them, how to respond. And so you probably consciously pay a lot of attention to what others are doing, and maybe you model what those other people are doing. And if things seem to work well, it's kind of like you make a little note for your mental program. Oh, that seemed to be a good thing to do. That worked out well. And if it works out well over and over and over again, it becomes a habit. And it becomes something you don't even worry about anymore. You see that person and you respond the way you've been successful in responding in the past. You just habitually do it. Now, keep in mind the following. The program is now like your unconscious. It's your habit. It controls that whole habit. But you created the unconscious, right? The programmer created the program. The program is a reflection of the programmer. It is not a little beast of its own that has its own, desires and goals and stuff. It is a way for the programmer to kind of offload. Like early on, you got to think hard and figure stuff out. But once you create a program, you don't have to do that anymore. It can just do it on sort of autopilot. It's like you're programming an autopilot system to respond to things. And this program gets triggered by certain environmental events. This person walks up and says, "Oh, how you doing?" and reaches out their hand or does whatever, and that triggers your program to respond habitually back the way you do. The environment triggers it, fantastic, but it was built by your consciousness. And let's say suddenly something like COVID happens, and now you can't shake hands anymore. Your habitual way of responding needs to be changed. This is the second place we think consciousness plays a big role, modifying our behavior. When a certain part or a certain component of our behavior is no longer effective. We've talked about this with the frontal lobes, frontal lobotomies, that people have trouble. Remember the Wisconsin card sorting task? People have trouble modifying their behavior. Once they've started behaving a certain way, they kind of stick with it if they've had a lobotomy. But this is where consciousness can say, you know what, that old program, can't do that anymore. I can't reach my hand out. It leads to bad results. I need to, first of all, stop that program from running. So this is one of the tricks with habits, right? Once they're really well developed, it's hard to stop them from firing off, because they just come into a stimulus and they want to fire off. And so you have to inhibit things, which takes a lot of conscious control. And eventually you want to rewrite your habit. And we are all right now rewriting our habits of social interaction to be ones that will work in the post-COVIDian world. Okay. Quick revision, just as we get to the point. For Freud, the unconscious is like this intelligent being. that's got its own goals and stuff. But in the cognitive view, the unconscious is just a collection of algorithms, as it were, a collection of habits that will allow the body to interact with the world in efficient ways that don't require conscious thought. Remember, we can only be aware of so many things at once. So if our bodies can react in appropriate ways without us having to be aware of things, that's efficient. That's cool. But again, the program is a reflection of the programmer. Okay, so now let's go back to some of these claims. Subliminal things. Stop smoking forever. Subliminal self-help for women. I think it's funny that they've especially done that. Slim forever for men. Free subliminal CB. Stop limiting your potential for success. Unlock the power of your subconscious mind and become successful this year. Okay, what are these things suggesting? Well, they're suggesting that I can play this message that your conscious mind can't hear. That's okay, because your unconscious mind probably can. I agree with that so far. The unconscious mind is paying attention to that. But now what they suggest is the unconscious mind will listen. And it's like some sort of soldier. If we tell the unconscious mind, when you reach for a cigarette, it will hurt in your hand and you'll never want to touch a cigarette again. That's what we convince the unconscious mind. It's like we can convince the unconscious mind of that, theoretically. And then the next time you have a chance to smoke, you'll start reaching for that cigarette, but you'll go no. And your conscious mind won't know why, but your unconscious mind won't want to touch that cigarette. And therefore, you'll stop smoking. The part of that is that's weird, or that doesn't fit with the cognitive thing, is the idea that the unconscious mind would learn this new behavior, would literally say, oh, when I reach out for a cigarette now, I'm going to think it's on fire. But no, it's the conscious mind that's doing the learning. It's the unconscious mind in which the learning is sort of deposited as a subroutine. All right. And so those habits, the habits we have in the unconscious mind are our habits. Your habits around smoking are, when it's 3:00, I go have a smoke. When so-and-so appears, we go have a smoke. When the class is over, I go have a smoke. Those are your habits. If I can trigger those, I can find ways of probably getting a cigarette in your hand before you want it, because that's consistent with your habits. Your unconscious are where your habits lie. They are not where your habits get changed. And so you're not going to suddenly change your eating habits or your study habits or anything else through the unconscious. The entity that changes habits is the conscious mind. And that goes for subliminal ads too. This is a subliminal ad. I chose a relatively tame one, I think. We're all mature individuals, right? But the idea being that, okay, they have these two individuals dipping a chip in salsa, which looks really nice, but they also emphasize those middle three letters. Does that make it grab us? Does that make it somehow more powerful? I mean, it may grab attention, right? From those bottom-up sort of ways. If this is a salient stimulus for you, it may indeed grab your attention. But there's no data to suggest that subliminals in ads actually increase people's purchasing, that you purchase more of that product because it's there. It may be a marketing thing, but you see, this is a marketing thing because you can see it. Imagine a true subliminal one where you can't see it. Then is it really going to draw the mind to it? Only if it's salient. That's what you know about the unconscious, right? Which is what I want to bring this all back to. We're still here, okay? And what they said about the subliminal perception thing, where they say subliminal perception doesn't work, what they mean is subliminal perception does not work like conscious perception does. When you're aware of something, there's extra things you can do, form habits, change habits, etc. Here, you can just trigger habits, but that's very powerful. The notion is that we do the same thing so often, like walking upstairs, we lift our feet so much. We don't want to recompute that every time. We just want to build a program that says lift your feet. And you see a stair, lift your foot. And, there's a wall there, swerve and miss it. Oh, you might want to breathe now and then. No, maybe not breathing, I don't know. But, we get this collection of habits, and that lets us move through the world in hyper-efficient ways. And every now and then the habits don't work well. And then conscious mind comes in to problem solve and figure out and how to reshape the habits better. Okay, so I hope that makes sense, and I hope we're still on the same track, and I can sort of say both the textbook author and myself are correct. My explanation is just more complete. All right, see you in the next lecture. Bye-bye.